Hey, everybody. Welcome to New York State Manufacturing Now, the podcast that's powered by FuzeHub. I'm your host, Steve Melito. Today, we're talking to Patty Rechberger, who manages FuzeHub's Jeff Lawrence Innovation Fund. The fund has awarded $8.7 million to 180 awardees. And it's been a great investment since the economic impact on New York State is $176 million and counting. So we've had Patty on the podcast before to talk about the commercialization competition, but today we're going to be talking about manufacturing grants. That's because round 2 of the 2024 awards will open on April 15th. Patty, welcome back to New York State Manufacturing Now.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure being here. You know, I'm a big fan of the work you do. Thank you for having me.
Well, I should give you a shout out in return because you've been recording some great video content for FuzeHub, which folks can find on the FuzeHub YouTube channel. So it's good to have you with us.
Yeah, we're going to do this all day because you're my inspiration when I record those as well.
You're too kind. So, Patty, what is a manufacturing grant and why does FuzeHub award them?
Fantastic question, Steve. So the main mission of the manufacturing grants is to connect the vast network of resources we have in New York with manufacturers that are in need of technical help. We have 86 organizations in New York that are at least partially funded by NYSTAR. So that was the original creation of the manufacturing grants back in 2016 was the first round. So the original mission was to encourage collaboration between these resources and the companies looking for the technical solutions that these resources can solve for them. Since then, the program has evolved. So now any not-for-profit can apply as the main applicant for the manufacturing grants. And it's still in the spirit of collaboration, so any kind of support that might still be technical transfer, but it could also be service providing. So I've been encouraging incubators and accelerators to apply, right? So any kind of support that a not-for-profit in New York State has for manufacturer companies in New York State, and all of those collaborations are good. So that's one aspect of the manufacturing grants. And the second one, obviously, is funding. A lot of our projects are in the R&D space. That is a time when it can be difficult to find funding. We talk about the valley of death, right? Between having that original idea and getting it to a point where other investors may be looking at it. You may need to validate it. You may need to create your prototype in the first place. You may need a proof of concept. You may need to do some testing and get the qualifications of a material or a product, how it works, how does it compare to current alternatives. So, all of this funding for all of these projects can be difficult to find. So that is what we're trying to bridge with the manufacturing grants.
Got it. And Patty, as you know, I wear a lot of hats for FuzeHub, and one is through our Manufacturer Solutions program. And I will often talk to people who are interested in it naturally, as they should be, and they talk about companies winning awards. And so this prompts my next question, which is, if the applicant is always a nonprofit, why do people talk about companies winning awards, or are we just not characterizing that in that way?
That's a very interesting question, Steve. So the main awardee for the manufacturing grants is the not-for-profit. But of course, as the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center in New York, our mission is to support the manufacturers. So I think there is no mistake in calling either one the awardee. Every application must have one of each, a not-for-profit and at least one manufacturer, potentially up to 5 manufacturers in the same application, as long as the project is cohesive and throughout all the manufacturers within it. So it's not incorrect to call the manufacturer the awardee. And I think it's part of our larger services and missions to support the manufacturing company. And so as such, we can often refer to them, and we continue to support them beyond the project completion. While the not-for-profits are often organizations that are almost like sister organizations, we partner up with them, including the solutions program, right? So we are well knowledgeable of the resources they have available.
Sure. And what are the eligibility requirements for manufacturers? You can't just wake up in the morning and say, I'm a manufacturer, right?
No, but we try to keep it simple and very inclusive, right? You have to be established company. You can't just be, okay, I just had this idea, I want to start, because you can certainly start the work before you're a company. But for the purposes of applying to the manufacturing grants or to any of the Jeff Lawrence Innovation Fund tracks, you must be a registered company. So you have to at least have opened it with New York State. You could be incorporated elsewhere as long as your main business location is in New York. So if you're incorporated somewhere else, we might have to go through some paperwork to prove where you're physically located. This is getting more challenging after COVID, of course, but we'll work with specifics of anybody who has a question. So back to your question. You have to be open as a entity, as a business entity. You can be an LLC, a sole proprietor, or a corporation. You don't have to be a corporation. You have to be located in New York State, even if you're incorporated elsewhere. You have to have a valid NAICS code. If you don't currently have one, we can help folks, and I know you do a lot of that in the solution side as well. We can help folks get a NAICS code in their Dun & Bradstreet account. This is all free, just a little bit of work. And that's how we qualify what a manufacturer is. So NAICS has a list of codes. Any code that starts with a 3 is a manufacturer. There's a few supporting service codes that we also allow for. So packaging, testing labs. There's a few additional codes. We have a list of that on our guidelines and on our website, and available for anybody who asks, of course. But basically, we used to say, as long as you have a physical product, right? Anything from beer to a medical device. It can be a chip, a part of a chip making process. It can be any kind of advanced materials, down to the nanoscale. So, I almost said the other day, if you can touch it, it's physical, but sometimes it's still physical even if you can't touch it, right? So quantum computing parts, processes are also eligible. And NIST last year included computer systems as a valid NAICS code. So that's very interesting. I often get questions about people developing software as medical devices. So I think this is an entry for that type of product as well. So it's been an interesting path defining what a manufacturing company is. But these are the requirements, basically. If you check all those boxes, you're eligible to apply.
Got it. And so over the years, the fund has worked with some fantastic startups. One of my favorite stories is Josh Aviv of Spark Charge, who gave just a fantastic talk many years ago, and he was on the White House lawn, I think earlier this year or maybe last year. But do you have to be a startup to get a manufacturing grant?
Certainly not. Although I would say we support a lot of startups. It's probably at least half of the companies we award tend to be in the startup space. But for the manufacturing grants, a company can be in any stage of development or maturity to apply. Since we're naming names, S-House out of Buffalo is over 100 years old, and they've been awarded by us twice. So literally anywhere in the development path, they are eligible to apply.
Good. I'm glad that you shared that example. So you have certainly cleared up a misconception that only startups can win. That's not the case.
Not at all.
Do only university-based nonprofits win?
No, although they are the bulk. I am not going to lie. Universities make at least half of our awardees, probably because they have so much to offer in terms of development and research labs and testing labs, and so many. It's incredible. I was actually curious, and I was looking up some university-based resources in other states. And, New York is pretty strong in that regard. So New York proud. But the other half is split. So the regional MEP centers in New York are all eligible to apply. They get a chunk of awards each year because they are doing fantastic work. They tend to put very nice applications as well. Some economic development agencies, as long as they're not a government agency, so an independent not-for-profit that is also economic development leaning, tend to win. Like I said, I've been working with incubators and accelerators, so I have a small percentage going to them as well. And then some other odds and ends, like years ago we had the Hudson Valley Textile Project, which is sort of a cohort of textile organizations in New York. And they're not for profit, and they've been awarded a couple times. They did fantastic development with the funds. So any not for profit, the main thing that we look for is fit. Why is this not-for-profit working with this manufacturer in particular? What we are looking at, both organizations should be gaining something out of that exchange somehow, right? So an incubator helping a startup, perfect fit. An R&D lab at a university helping manufacturer, develop, or test a new product or process, perfect fit. So that perfect fit can happen in a gazillion ways, probably far beyond what I've seen or can imagine.
Good to know. So, Patty, let's talk about equipment. A lot of manufacturers I talk to are looking for money to pay for equipment. Will a manufacturing grant pay for the purchase of a machine? And if so, who owns it, the nonprofit or the manufacturer?
Okay, I'm going to whisper now because this is our best known secret. We are one of the very few grants that cover equipment. I hear that a lot, right? When people are looking for equipment, and incidentally, the Hudson Valley Textile Project was looking for new equipment. And they're like, Patty, who else can fund this? I don't know anybody else who can fund the equipment. So this is a strong part of our program. Equipment purchases are eligible for the manufacturer grants. Who owns it? We don't make that assessment. We don't make that call. It's up to the team. So, and by team, I mean the not-for-profit and the manufacturer and whoever else is working together to put the application together, and who else is benefiting from the equipment. Is up to them to decide who owns it. However, during the scoring process of an application, that may come into account if whoever owns the equipment can subsequently make it available to other organizations that will benefit from it, particularly other manufacturers. You'll probably score better. That is not to say that we haven't scored well and awarded equipment that was ultimately owned by the manufacturer and not shared with anybody else. So, it really depends on the details of the technology, of how innovative it is, of the needs to share that equipment. There's a whole set of subtasks to consider there. So we don't have a hard rule for that.
Good to know. Another question, and I'm sure you get this one an awful lot. What are some things that the manufacturing grants will and won't cover? You mentioned things like testing, and we just talked about equipment, of course, but what else would you like to highlight?
Okay, so the main thing that it covers is whatever direct project-related costs you have, right? So if you're developing a prototype or testing a product, anything, equipment, labor, materials, tooling, tools, consulting work, some travel, if you can justify it, how does it relate, right, to the project? So it's pretty broad. And in the most generic term, it does not cover overhead. So any admin costs, project management costs, any sales. For the most part, the manufacturing grants do not cover marketing. We have allowed for minimal marketing. That was a recent change, but it has to be justified. It has to be part of a broader project. It can all be marketing. Patent costs are a tough one. Right? We struggle with that because they can add up so quickly, and we don't want to fund a project that is nothing but patent development, specifically, right, in terms of costs. But sometimes those costs may be necessary, so we're still struggling with that one. And I mentioned labor as a eligible cost. However, any executive labor is not eligible. So frequently in the case of startups, the founder is also the main engineer. And even if they're doing bona fide engineer development for their product or prototype, their time is not eligible for reimbursement.
I see. That's an important distinction to make.
Yes, and I know, and I've gotten pushback, just like with the patents, right? I've gotten pushback about that one, and I understand it, but that's how the program is set up. So just putting it out there.
Well, as long as I'm asking you tough questions, how do you find a nonprofit to partner with if you don't have one already?
That is definitely a frequently asked question, Steve. Manufacturers hear about this program, they are eager to apply, they have a great idea, they're like, okay, I just need a not-for-profit. So there is a couple of things we can do. We don't promise to make that connection. I have been curious and I've looked it up. There are hundreds of thousands of not-for-profits in New York State. I couldn't possibly get familiar with all of them. But obviously we're familiar with all the 9-star resources. So we got at least 86 organizations we can try to partner manufacturers with for the purpose of applying to a manufacturing grant. So if the manufacturer has a product or a technical issue that is a fit for what those centers can solve, that is a clean one, and we have made those connections so successfully. We connected Opal wearables with the Binghamton University IEEC. Don't ask me to spell it out, but it's the Electronics Center at Binghamton. And that partnership became so successful. They applied to the manufacturing grants. They were awarded. Subsequently, Opal applied to the commercialization competition and was awarded. So that's like our highlight of how everything works perfectly if you come, to work with FuzeHub. All that said, we encourage people to look. Sometimes people are already working with not-for-profits in some regard, and they didn't realize that could be the venue, right? So I've had people call me out and say, I need a not-for-profit, and in the conversation, I go, are you familiar with any not-for-profits? Oh, actually, we're working, in this other regard with this not-for-profits. Like, well, tap them. Because if you already know them and you're already working with them, chances are you got the fit, right? So, because you're already working together. So clearly there is benefit in that relationship. And, I hate to say this, but the end-all, be-all, Google it. Try to find a not-for-profit in your space. There's so many different industries. We're industry agnostic within manufacturers. So they're not-for-profits, right? In every industry, get creative. We've already mentioned it doesn't have to be a university. So you can find somebody whose mission is to support underprivileged workers, maybe a contract manufacturer that is a not-for-profit. We've awarded those as well. There's a gazillion ways to get creative with a not-for-profit.
Good. Could it be your local MEP center?
Absolutely, yes. In a blue sky world, the one that we're mentioning where everything happens ideally, every MEP center would apply every year. A shout out to our sister MEP centers. Send me your applications.
Very good. Now, Patty, let's talk happier stuff. What happens when you're awarded, or if you're awarded, I should say, but what happens when you're awarded?
Fantastic. Yeah, so that's the fun part. We immediately set up a call. So we get the whole team on a Zoom call. We cover everything that is required of them. We answer questions. We talk about the project. We set a timeline, not necessarily on the call, right? But then after the call, they send us the specifics of the timeline. They have a generic timeline as part of the application, but then they have to send me some more detailed information. The not-for-profit signs the grant agreement. And then they start the project. We have a little bit of a window between announcing the award and when they can start the project. So we work with them, right, to define the start of the project. They have 12 months to complete it, and then they get to work. We follow up on a regular basis. We set up some milestones. Upon milestone completion, they submit a report. We meet with them. We go through what I like to now call the good, the bad, and the ugly, which sometimes people will giggle in a call when I say that. Like, oh, Patty, we got some ugly. Because things don't always go as planned, right? Like sometimes you start the work and people don't receive the materials, or even worse, they don't receive the equipment they're trying to order. We had a lot of delays. We've seen a lot of delays occur, or you test something and it doesn't happen the way you anticipated. And that, again, can be good or bad. I've had projects where products got tested and they did not behave in the way that they were hoping for. They were worse. So, that's one way to de-risk that project is you go through the test and you find out that, well, it doesn't work this way. How else could it work? But I also had products tested where they far surpassed the best expectations. So, so we go through all of that. We continue to support. We connect our awardees to the solutions program. If they have not worked or already been engaged with the solutions program, we introduce them to the other services we provide at FuzeHub. We introduce them to the marketing team on occasion if that's what they're looking for, if it's a fit. Then eventually they complete the project. We come out and visit and check things out, and and then continue ongoing support for the life of the company. I try to stay in touch with, what did you say, 180 manufacturers. It's getting harder to visit everybody, but I do my best to stay in touch, and I encourage people to reach out, and anytime they have news or anything interesting to share, I'm always eager to hear from them.
Well, good. And what happens upon project completion?
They send a final report. We check everything that, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and that's pretty much it. So at that point, we just set up a time for the FuzeHub team to come and visit.
Listen, when does round 2 of the manufacturing grants open or begin?
Right. So as you mentioned, round 2 open April 15. I know that people are eagerly waiting for the announcement of round 1. People have been asking. So the announcement of round 1 is currently scheduled to be made anywhere between April 18th and the 25th. We're still in the process of selecting them. So between the 18th and the 25th, we should be ready to announce, which is past the round 2 opening date. So anybody who's waiting and in doubt, feel free to start a round 2 application. If you're awarded on round 1, you can let us know. Well, obviously we'll know you may not pursue round 2. You may only get 1 award a year for the manufacturing grants. So, we can just delete that application after the fact. But anybody who has not applied for round 1 can start their application on April 15. The due date is May 14th. And very excited this year about the video component that was new for 2024. Instead of a fully written application, we asked the teams to send a 10-minute video of who they are and what's the project, what's the product, what's the economic impacts, and I am thrilled with the submissions. People really delivered, our applicants delivered on their videos. It's been a pleasure watching them, so I can't wait to watch more of that.
Oh, that's excellent. So listen, one last question for you, Patty. And it's sort of a 2-part question. How do you apply? And then what do you do if you have questions about the application process?
All right, easy peasy. I've actually been told earlier this year by more than one previous applicant that our application process is pretty simple. So, encouraging everybody to take a look at it, because it can be daunting, specifically if you've never applied for a grant before. And we have first-time ever grant applicants come in and be awarded. So that's very exciting. You go on our website, right? FuzeHub.com. You find the funding tab. You go into manufacturing grants. All of the materials are in there. So there's some basics right on the manufacturing grants page, but then you got access to your guidelines. There's a budget template. You submit us the budget for, if you're awarded, how you're spending the money. We've mentioned eligible and ineligible costs, so we need to make sure that you have a good sense of how you're spending that money within the eligible costs. So you create a account in the SurveyMonkey Apply platform. That's the platform we use for applications. You got the link right on our website. So you just follow, it's click, click, click. You just follow the prompts, create an account. You fill out with some contact information. You film your video. That's the fun part. Have fun with it. Don't make it, it doesn't have to be a strict presentation. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint presentation in any way. We want to see people's faces. We want to see your product. We want you to, just talk about it like we're talking right now. Upload that. Upload your budget. There's a $65 fee to apply, and then you submit. And then it goes through scoring. And the second part, if you have questions, reach out to the fund team. My email is patty@fuzehub.com. You can send generic inquiries to the fund, FUND@FuzeHub.com. So, if you don't want to necessarily talk to me, that's fine. I won't be hurt a little bit, but not too much. And then we'll address all your questions, and you can always give us a call, and whoever answers the phone will send you my way. And, I'll guide you through whatever questions you have. We can check eligibility questions. If you're not too sure, I may or may not be a fit. If you have further questions as far as, I'm thinking of this not-for-profit organization, I don't know if this is a fit, I can give you a general assessment of all that.
Very good. Patty, thank you so much for being on New York State Manufacturing Now.
It's been my absolute pleasure, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. We've been talking to Patty Rechberger, who manages FuzeHub's Jeff Lawrence Innovation Fund. And Patty puts the fun in the fund, but that's not the only way to have fun with FuzeHub. That's because it's almost time for Vitality in the Valley, a manufacturing expo that's scheduled for June 4th and 5th in Herkimer, New York. Vitality in the Valley is where New York State's food, beverage, and agriculture ecosystem comes together. And if you exhibit at this year's event, you'll gain access to an exclusive pre-event reception with pairings of local foods and drinks. And yes, networking is on the menu. Don't wait to register. Go to FuzeHub.com/VIV-2024 to learn more, and make sure you register. So on behalf of New York State Manufacturing Now, this is Steve Melito signing off.